Everybody's been saying that Tactician's Authority is a dead set and that it has been nerfed into the ground. But I'm sorry guys, I simply have to disagree. As I already mentioned in my gear set tier list video, I still believe that Tactician's Authority is a decent set. I especially like the new design of it now. I could agree that it could use some small number buffs, and with that I mean some very small number buffs. But because I truly stand behind those words, I truly believe that Tactician's Authority is not dead yet. I created my first build with a Tactician's 4-piece and I've had nothing but a lot of success with it. So today I'm gonna give you my very first fully functioning PvE and PvP healer build, and I'm calling it the Combat Medic. Let's begin. A lot of you guys that have been watching my videos for a somewhat longer time might remember the video that I posted a few months ago about my experimental healer build that utilized the support station range performance mods to create a very large, almost LMB-like support station to give the team more freedom in movement while still getting those heals. Although in patch 1.4 that range is not really possible anymore simply because the performance mod themselves have been nerfed pretty heavily, the concept of the build that I'm using right now is still the same. It has a very large focus on the immunizer support station to keep the whole team topped off and to clear them of any negative status effects. As I said, I'm running this with a 4-piece Tacticians, but in addition to that, I also have a vigorous chest piece and a specialized backpack. Both of those complement the build very well. Most of these gear set pieces are not really your everyday gear set pieces, however. I spent a lot of time getting the perfect gear even before patch 1.4 dropped. We can start with the Tactician's Authority mask, for example. It has 1008 stamina, which is the maximum roll that you can get on a 229 piece. It has skill power, it has enemy armor damage, and because this is an item that I got in the 1.3 patch, it also still has that skill attribute on it, which in this case is the 2.5% support station healing speed. The gloves also have that same 1008 stamina roll on it, among with some critical hit chance, LMG damage, because yes, I'm still using an LMG this patch, we will get into that soon. It also has 14% critical hit damage, and again, because it is an item from the 1.3 patch, it has a skill attribute with 2.5% support station duration. The knee pads are actually an item that I got this patch in 1.4, since I really didn't want to lose out on that extra performance mod slot. It has 1003 electronics, which is pretty close to the maximum. It has armor, blind death resistance, bleed resistance, and just like the mask, it has enemy armor damage. And then we get to the holster, which kind of completes this 4-piece Tacticians. Nothing special to see here really, just some main stats that I tried to get as high as possible, especially the electronics. And then I simply rolled some armor on it. I actually always carry 2 vigorous chest pieces with me, both of them have armor, both of those have exotic damage resilience. Both of them have ammo capacity, and both of them also have extra support station range as a skill attribute. The only way that they differ is that one piece has stamina on it and the other one has electronics on it. Just as with the gloves and with the mask, I farmed a huge amount of chest pieces before the 1.4 patch came out, so they would have those skill attributes on it, and now this allows me to equip one piece or the other depending on what I need or what I'm feeling like running with. In the beginning I preferred to run with a lot more stamina because I was of course used to the 700k toughness, but now that I'm getting more familiar with this build, I prefer to run more electronics. And it's not like I'm super squishy when I do so, because even if I'm running electronics here, I still have a very respectable of 283,000 toughness. And that amount will also be very heavily inflated because of all the buffs and all the heals, so for me, this amount is enough to stay alive most of the time. But again, we will get into that very soon. The backpack that I use is a specialized one with 999 electronics. It also again has armor and ammo capacity. At one point with this build I actually had the idea to run with an inventive backpack because that would give me more skill power, but only when my character was at full health. But I decided to do away with that at some point because there were simply too many things denying me from getting use out of it. It only takes one bullet to take away the 15% extra skill power. And it just didn't really fit with the way that I wanted to play it. I'd rather have an unconditional skill power bonus, which is a bit weaker, than something that is stronger but a lot more situational and with a lot less uptime. For all my mods, I've got electronics mods with armor rolled on them as a major attribute, except for one mod, because I've got one that is spec'd into firearms instead of electronics, and that was to reach the 2400 firearms mark that I would need to unlock some of the important talents on my weapon. I filled up all the performance mod slots with, you probably guessed it, support station range mods, simply because even though I cannot reach that 15 meters range anymore, the The difference between 8 meters and 10.5 meters is still very noticeable, and it is helpful in a lot of cases. The goal with this build was mainly to reach a skill power of around 250,000. That is because after the video that I created on skill power about the PTS and that it didn't scale properly, the developers changed the scaling of skill power. Skill power now scales at a linear rate up to about 250,000 skill power. Only after that the diminishing returns will start to kick in, and they will kick in very heavily. But that kind of makes it worth to spec into skill power again, up until that point. Now because I'm using Tactician's Authority, the skill power that I actually have that varies a bit. At the base, it sits at 209,000 skill power. However, when I get my stacks up, which actually happens quite a bit in PvP, since it is now based of course on how many bullets you land and not about the amount of damage, the skill power can be as high as 266,000, which of course sits really close to that sweet spot. But let's move on to the weapons, or I should say weapon, because I actually only use one weapon. And believe it or not, the weapon that I use is the Hungry Hawk. This weapon, along with some other named weapons, have received pretty big buffs this patch. Not in the form of their talents, I mean the talents are still pretty shitty, but in the form of their damage scaling with firearms. If we for example take this well-rolled M60, you will see that the per bullet damage sits at 13,700. But if we then take a look at the Hungry Hawk, that one is sitting at 15,200 per bullet damage. They both have the same reload speed, they both have the same magazine size, and they both have the same rate of fire. The Hungry Hawk is simply a lot stronger. Now, the talents on the Hungry Hawk, they aren't the best, but they actually are pretty easy to unlock as well, because all of them only require you to have 2,324 firearms. Now, of course, I can reroll a talent, so I replaced Stable with Competent, because with this build, I'm pretty much always throwing down skills, and so I will have 100% uptime of Competent, and of course, that's just gonna add 10% damage to my build. Now, you might think that the other two talents, Predatory and Meticulous, are pretty useless, because I'm a healer, and as a healer, I'm not going to get much kills. That's what most people are gonna say, right? And I wouldn't say that you're wrong, I'm not gonna get a lot of kills. But what a lot of people do not know is that all of these on-kill talents and on-kill mechanics, they also proc when you kill an enemy skill. So you can destroy a turret, a support station, a mobile cover, or even a seeker mine, and then both of these talents will proc. Aside from that, it's also really good to run with LMGs nowadays, because LMGs also have their extra bonus damage to targets out of cover, which is the very last damage multiplier in the game that is calculated multiplicative. Now, why is it important? That is because if I activate things such as the booster shot or Competent, which as I said, those are gonna be active pretty much 100% of the time, the bonus damage for targets out of cover is calculated on top of that, which makes it that much more powerful. Now, I've modded the Hungry Hawk with a lot of headshot damage mods and a lot of reload speed mods. That is simply because, for one, this weapon has a very long base reload time of 5.75 seconds. That is just something that I did not want to deal with, and I've been able to reduce it to 3.65 seconds, which is a significant difference. And then, as I said, I also went for the headshot damage because it's generally quite easy to land headshots with an LMG. Even in PvP, if players are, for example, stunned, or if they're aiming down sights themselves as well. This allows you to, as the healer, still burst someone down when they least expect it. What really makes this weapon shine though is the 100 round magazine. It allows you to simply hold down the fire button, miss half of your shots, and still slowly wheel away at some guy that just used his heal. You might not always get the kill, let's face it, the burst potential with this build is pretty much zero, but at the very least you will force out a medkit, or force them to fall back. And that means that they're not trading fire with your damage dealers, which in turn means that your damage dealers are probably going to kill them. I also had a few funny instances where players, they didn't have their healing skills, so they ran away from me until I maybe had to reload so they could turn around on me. That might be a very good idea versus someone with an MP7 or an AUK, but it's a very bad strategy versus someone with a 100 round weapon, which is something that players aren't really used to yet in the Dark Zone. Most players are still running around with either the shotgun or either the SMGs. But enough about the weapon that I'm using. If you still have any second thoughts on the raw power of the Hungry Hawk, I highly suggest that you watch WOBO's new video on the weapon scaling for the 1.4 patch, and you will see there that the Hungry Hawk wipes the floor with almost every other weapon in the game. Again, there will be a link in the description. But as I said, enough about the weapons. This is a healer build after all, so why don't we talk about the stuff that actually matters, the skills and the talents. because those are going to be the things that are going to heal the other players up. First up, as I said, I'm running with the Immunizer support station, but I'm also running with the first aid booster shot besides that. This shouldn't really come as a surprise, as I'm running with the Vigorous Chest Piece, and the booster shot of course works very well with that. The support station actually also works with the Vigorous Chest Piece in patch 1.4, but there's still a bug with it. Currently, it only overheals yourself and not your teammates, which makes the build a bit weaker than it should be. This clearly isn't the intention, as the first aid booster shot does indeed give that overheal to the other players. So I hope that this can get fixed in the future. The signature skill that I'm using is the recovery link. I used to play a lot with the tactical link in the beginning of the 1.4 patch, but at the end of the day it is a lot easier for the damage dealer to run in and decide when they need the tactical link. At least it's a lot easier for them than it is for me. I cannot look at what they want to do. And since I'm also watching health bars during fights for the most part, the recovery link only makes more sense. The talents that I'm using are Triage, Critical Save, Combat Medic, and Death by Proxy. Triage is still a very powerful talent, even though the functionality has been changed where players cannot run in and out of the first aid anymore. I still think that this is good. It gives you a 15 or a 30% skill cooldown reduction, which pretty much procs every time, unless you completely miss your heal and no one uses it. Critical Save is a bit bugged this patch. The talent does not show a visual indicator under your health bar like it used to, but I can guarantee you that this is just a visual bug, because if you pop a medkit on your last health segment, it will still work. Combat Medic is an incredibly powerful talent for group play, and it will always be a must take unless this is somehow changed in the future. Healing all your teammates up by 40% every time that you pop a medkit is very useful. It allows anyone in the team to pop a medkit, even if they don't need it themselves, just to help a teammate out that is in a lot of trouble and has already used his own medkit. Death by Proxy is something that I never really used before the 1.4 patch, but right now with everybody picking skills that are not the pulse, I think it is very powerful as well. The skill gives you 20% more skill power for 30 seconds every time that you destroy an enemy skill. So next time that you see somebody popping a Seeker Mine and you don't complain about it, you say yes, because I'm gonna get 20% more skill power. The only two skills that it does not proc with are the Smart Cover and the Ballistic Shield. For some reason, if you destroy Ballistic Shield, the talent doesn't proc, and if you destroy an enemy Smart Cover with an EMP grenade, then it also doesn't proc. Using this talent is pretty funny sometimes, because when me and my group played PvP a lot and we beat the same group a few times in a row, you will often see that eventually they pull out the Immunizer as well, in the hope that this will be their saving grace. But more often than not, the Immunizer that they place down, it isn't optimized at all. It has a very low healing output, it has very low health, and they're also not that experienced with it, so they put it in bad places, which makes it an easy target for me to shoot down, and it only makes my own heal stat much stronger because of the Death by Proxy. Now I have to admit though, playing with this build, it will take some time getting used to, not just for the one playing with the build, but also for the other 3 members of the squad. I'm a bit lucky because 2 out of the 3 players that I play with are players that I've been playing with for a while now, and I've played the healer build with them in patch 1.3 as well. So, all those players, they have some experience with it, they know how to play around it. But, when I'm playing with players that are not used to it yet, you will often see them not really using the Immunizer, and that will result into a lot of unnecessary deaths, because of course they're not staying topped off. Now that isn't to say that your teammates should be forced to stay in one spot or forced to stay in the Immunizer at all times. Sometimes they have to push in to finish someone off or have to run away to avoid a lot of damage. And it is the healer's job to put the support station in a good spot. Especially with the new way that cooldown works, where basically the cooldown starts only after the support station has expired, placing the support station in a good or a bad spot, that can be all the difference between rolling over the other players like nothing else, or getting shocked, being put on fire, being hit with Predator's Mark, and being sent back into the Dark Zone checkpoints. When holding up at choke points, you want to look for corners or small areas to place it down so that the enemy has to look away from your teammates to shoot it. When pushing in, you want to throw it as close to the enemies as possible so that you can go hard in on them, but you still want to place it out of a line of sight, so for example behind a car or behind a truck. When you're going for a rope cut, make sure that the rope is in range of the support station, so everybody, including the rope cutter, gets healed passively all the time, and if you of course combine that with a survivor link and some decent body blocking of the bullets, the chances are very large that they will not be able to stop you from stealing their gear. The one thing that I still do a lot is drop it in the wheels of the cars. For some reason you can throw it right in there, and then players cannot really shoot it down because the car tires are blocking it. Now, in prolonged fights, good players will more often than not try to go for a flank and try to take down the immunizer from behind. So, you as the healer, you kind of have to be the protector of the support station, so to speak. You have to keep an eye on it at all times. What you can even do is put a couple of shock turrets next to it, so that when anyone comes close enough to hit it, he will be stunned and he will become an easy target to burst down. As far as the booster shot goes, this thing can be used in all sorts of ways. Of course, you never really want to use it on yourself unless you have no other option, but instead what you want to do with this is use it for your teammates if they are low on health and they need a refill. You can use it when they're about to die to be their saving grace, or you can even use it preemptively and shoot it right in front of your team so that everybody receives a full overheal and 15% extra damage the moment that they push in. A few last tips that I have for you is that you have to keep in mind that the booster shot bonus, the 15% damage and 15% damage reduction, cannot be refreshed. So if you already have the booster shot effect on you, you will have to wait to reapply it until the first one is gone. Otherwise, it will have no effect. Second thing that you have to keep in mind is that the Tactician's Authority stacks icon under your health bar is also a bit bugged. Currently, it is set to visualize a full icon at 100% extra skill power. But, as we all know, Tacticians has been reworked, and the current maximum bonus skill power is now 30%. This is fine, however, this hasn't been updated yet in the UI, so visually, these Tactician stacks will never go past 1/3 of the logo. It makes the stacks seem to go up much slower, and it makes it quite hard to tell when you're on your max stacks. Then, what you also want to keep in mind is that for some reason, Competent only activates after the support station is expired, so when it blows up. My best guess is that this talent is coded towards looking at skill cooldowns to determine whether it should proc or not. And because right now the cooldown doesn't start until the support station is expired, Competent will not proc before that either. Another thing that's important to keep in mind is that the first aid can still be a bit buggy at times, especially when shooting it on inclines or something that doesn't have a flat surface. It can still get stuck the same way as before. You shoot it on the staircase, then the green thingy that shoots out, it keeps slowly rolling down, and therefore it's never really hitting the ground, and thus it's never really activating. Last up, and this is more of a general tip, is to always make sure that you're playing on low ping servers. Especially with the healer build, it is much harder to land heals on teammates on high ping servers. And you have to shoot much more in front of them if you want to hit them, which can be quite difficult sometimes. Also, on these high ping servers, I've had a lot of cases where grenades seem to be invisible on my screen, causing me to die instantly without being able to do anything about it. For example, here's some footage of my teammate where he can see the grenade indicator on his screen, but then on my screen there is no grenade indicator at all. That of course causes me to stay in the same spot because, you know, I don't see any danger and then I instantly take fatal damage. To check the ping on the server on your PC, you have to open the task manager, then go to your source control, go to network, and then there should be a few networks called the Division X. Two of those will have 55,000 as the external port, one of them is static and one of them is variable. The variable one is the one that you will need to look at, as that displays the server ping. A good server sits anywhere between 30 and 60, but if you're playing with over 150, you might want to consider switching to a different server, either through joining a friend or through random matchmaking. On consoles though, well boys, I guess you're out of luck. I do not believe there's a way to check ping on consoles, but it's usually pretty obvious when you have a bad server. In all seriousness though, Massive, please fix these grenades. All in all, I can say that this build is a lot of fun to play, and it is very satisfying when your teammate is about to die, or when he goes in and you heal him at the last second back to full overheal and see him wailing away at those enemies. Not only that, but the support station immunizer counters a lot of the upcoming new favorite builds, such as Predator's Mark and Firecrest. Both of those sets will be pretty much useless as long as people are standing in your immunizer. And not only that, but people are also using a lot more skills other than the pulse nowadays. And this build literally feeds off the idea that other people are dropping down Seeker Mines, turrets and immunizers, which I can then focus down to boost my own skill power. The thing with this build is, you have to be in combat, you have to be landing bullets, and you have to be actively killing or destroying things for this build to shine. That is the reason why I named it the Combat Medic. And that's going to be it for this video. If you have any questions or have any suggestions, then of course you can hit me up either in the comment section down below or on Twitter, and I'll be able to take a look at it there. And as always, I will see you guys later, or like they say in the Netherlands, zie je later!